This is Martin, part of the Season 1 Autonomy class, also known as the Georgia Freeman, speaking with Pete, Mance, Rayder of Freeman Beyond the Wall podcast. So welcome, Pete.
How are you doing today, man? So we're both in Georgia?
Yes. Yeah, actually, I'm in the Metro Atlanta area. Are you in the metro area or outside of it?
I am in the metro area.
Okay, I didn't realize that. So that's awesome. And then I know you're a Florida transplant from New York. I kind of want to explore that part of it because that's always an interesting story to me, because New York is like that's one of the spots where if I can never go there, I'm probably fine.
I try to go 2 or 3 times a year. There's so many people up there I like, and I enjoy their company. There's some great food up there, but of those 3, I maybe will try to see family once or something like that. Because I just want to go there to have a good time, and that usually runs out in about 3 days too. So
hey, it sounds just like my wife. That's exactly what she wants to go for. And I can be dragged up there because I understand there's cultural value. I just can't get past all the state stuff that is running in the back of my mind all the time. So
it's pretty bad. Yeah.
So I can get into the autonomy questions. For my curiosity, man, first off, does autonomy have a meaning to you in any way?
Autonomy has come to mean to me not being autonomous from other people, but being autonomous from state control. And when, people, Tom Woods talked about this recently, where someone said that, libertarians just want to be out on an island by themselves. That's 100% not true. I mean, well, there are some, but it's not 100% not true. When we talk about self-ownership, and well, I won't speak for everyone, but when I talk about self-ownership and when I talk about autonomy, I mean, the state has no reason to be in my life at all. So, that's the first thing I think of autonomy is. I think of the one organization that has a monopoly on power that can hold me back from doing the things that I want to do in life. And that's the state. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Yeah. And so, my next question, like, because I'm trying to figure this out, and, everything you just said really resonates with me. And I think I'll have a couple more questions that gets into that autonomous versus, controlled life. But how are you working to live autonomously at this point?
Well, you mean as far as the state goes, or as the definition I just used, or?
Yeah.
Oh, I really think that it's a state of mind. It's having the idea. I think one of the first things I did was I realized that if I'm going to, the most immediate state forces that I can have interaction with are the police. So my idea is I never want to call the police. I never want to have to rely on the police for anything. So I bought weaponry, the same weaponry they use mostly, got trained on how to use it, and basically took my own policing into my own hands. If somebody broke into my house, I'm not going to call the police until I'm absolutely sure that the threat is neutralized, however that may be, making them run, God forbid, having to put someone down. But I also have set up my house so that it would be very hard for somebody to get in, because it's, Dale Brown from Detroit Threat Management talks about, preemptive stuff. You don't want to get into a situation, so do everything you can to not. So most immediately, autonomy from the government would be, I don't want those people that I could have a chance to deal with on a pretty regular basis. I want to be able to live my life. I mean, I don't speed. I drive the speed limit. Don't weave in and out. I mind my own business. I follow their rules as best I can, and I don't want to deal with them. So, that's most immediate. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the that's the great challenge of life, I think, because I feel like that's the expanding state is the police force. So I will, I'm more interested in hearing from you, so I won't, meander into that, but I apologize. You hit like the nerve center to me with your, at least a lot of your recent podcasts as you talk about police. So, I just hear you on that. Now on your website, you also say you've led to, via your path led to a voluntarist or voluntary style mentality. Same thing. What does that mean to you in regard to life or the way that you operate?
I'm I'm a voluntarist. That means I believe that all interaction should be voluntary. And unfortunately, when you say that, immediately people want to bring up the negatives that could be used for that. Oh, you don't want to deal with people who don't look like you, or you don't want to deal with people who have your own skin color. I live in the Atlanta metro area. I mean, we literally have everything here, and I don't. Yeah, I like it. I grew up in New York City. I like.
Yeah.
The my problem with New York City is not the people; it's the government there. And the people do allow the government there, but I mean, uh, I,
Just like here.
I'm not one of these people who can't be friends with some, who's going to unfriend somebody because we have political differences. As long as they're cool with me and I'm cool with them, I don't see them as the enemy. But voluntarism to me is just being able to choose who you interact with, and that goes back to the police. They are not somebody that you can choose to say, no, I don't want to interact with you. You do that and you bring threat to your life. So immediately, and that's why I'm always harping on the police. What I've said so far, they are the most immediate threat to you, and you cannot divorce yourself from them if they decide that they want to interact with you.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, and let's not say if they decide they want to interact with you, if they decide that they are going to forcefully interact with you, because that makes it sound like, you have a choice. You could walk away, but no, you don't. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's, well, I want to talk about your exploration of the problem of the current state of policing here in just a second anyways, because I feel like you're bringing in a very cogent and strong argument for self-policing. And prior to that, let me just ask, it's similar to autonomy, but autonomy is a little different. How do you approach the voluntary lifestyle? So we know the police are not a voluntary interaction, and I totally agree with that. And I think voluntary interaction is the only moral actions. So, is there anything special that you do to try and act in a voluntary way?
I don't hang out with people I don't want to. I think that's most important. I don't feel because I may be friends with somebody and they have a friend, and it's I want this person to be a mutual friend. Well, if I don't like that person, I'm not going to interact with them. Being a voluntarist in the real world is one of the hardest things that you can do, because you are forced to interact with people. If you work in a job if you choose to work in a job that's customer service, you're going to be dealing with people you probably would not want to deal with. So you have to learn how to deal with them. But I mean, the way really that I think that any of us can really practice voluntarism is on the internet, is on social media. I mean, all of these platforms have set it up so that you do not have to interact with somebody if you don't want to. There are block functions, there are mute functions, and I really wish that those were in real life, because we should have those functions in real life. And so I do practice that on social media. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, you just don't want, that person's making an argument. You don't want it. It's like, if somebody's making an argument I don't agree with, I don't necessarily feel like I have to correct them.
No.
Why is it up to me to correct them? You know, they're the one who's, in my estimation, they're the one who's wrong. And, you know, I'm not a person who is I don't have a gentle touch. I'm not, I'm going to tell it like it is, and it is going to I can offend people. So I'd rather just, you know, separate myself from the situation. So yeah, I think that's where you can have autonomy is online, because you can deal with who you want to, you can not deal with who you want to, and all day. You know, I mean, now if one of these platforms that you're choosing to go on decides to block you, well, I mean, that's a, you know, that's, you know, and then some people say, oh, we need to turn this into a public utility so we can force them to not block you. And I'm just like, you know, I understand that it seems on social media, where everybody gets together nowadays, more so even than in real life, I mean, by far, that there is a conspiracy against certain groups. Well, yeah, that's true, but what do you want to do about it? You know, especially if you're someone like myself who is like, I'm a voluntarist. I do not want the government to have anything to do. What am I supposed to do? Ask the government to get involved? That seems
Right.
very, that seems very inconsistent.
Yeah, slightly. Well, no, it's a great conundrum because, you know, either we believe in you know, there's so many arguments to that one that you brought up. It's a great point because while it is a platform, it is privately owned, and yes, there's subsidies, but to me, I'm with you. I don't want state being more involved than they already are. And it does bring up interesting things where there are, in reality, platforms opening up so that people can interact in a voluntary fashion all the time. And the market does work. It's just everyone thinks it's got to be the biggest thing, in my opinion. So
yeah, I mean, well, I can interact with politicians, and I can interact with journalists on Twitter, because, you know, and those same people aren't on this platform over here. So what?
yeah.
So what? I mean, if they don't want you there, I mean, I don't want to be a part of a club that doesn't want me.
No, that's it exactly. Well, I've been curious. So you kind of explained it, but you know, what is your relationship with cops? And by that I mean, do you have a history beyond just being a voluntarist and noticing a problem? Like, were you a cop, or, you know, something along those lines?
No, I no, never was a cop, no matter what Carr and Bird might want to say. But I've never really I've had bad interactions with police, but nothing that like has stuck in my mind. You know, nothing where I can go, you know, it's just a bad interaction. I know a lot of people who've had bad interactions with police. My brother was arrested for something that was completely not his fault. A police officer told him to help him in a crowd, when a police officer was trying to do crowd control, and he told my brother to help him. My brother's like, no, I'm not going to help you. And yeah, my brother actually got arrested for
Attempted cop.
yeah, I can't remember what the charge was. It was so many years ago.
Yeah.
But no, I just see that if I'm going to live in the kind of society that I want to live in, there is no place for them. I mean, there really isn't. I mean, there's a place for you being your own cop. There's a place for hiring cops. What I like even better, the idea I like even better, is that people who of the same interests come together and they do their own policing.
Yeah.
You know, and that can go beyond just community watch. But yeah, I mean, it just, policing is, they do some really evil stuff. Everything, pretty much the majority of what they do, the overwhelming majority of what they do, is immoral and against natural law, against your you know,
property rights.
No victim, no crime. You know, most of the stuff they're dealing with has no victim.
Yep.
And I mean, they are the arm. They are the armed enforcers of laws, of upholding and making sure people don't break laws that corrupt politicians make. And the sad part with them and their cognitive dissonance is most every cop will tell you that politicians are corrupt, yet they enforce with violence their laws. So, I mean, it all the way around modern policing. And then we could get into the fact that what do you pay them? You know, everybody gets paid that they have all these level rates. So, I mean, like the economic calculation problem of socialism applies to cops, because it's like, you know, how do you if you have no pricing, if there's no market for it, then it's just going to be corrupt, and it won't be able to. You're not going to be able. You're going to be. It's run like a socialist program. It's run like, you know, like food production in the old Soviet Union. So it's, you know, it can't work all around. It's broken all around.
No, I mean, that's the simplest. So, you know, you answered two questions I was going to have with that, but
that happens all the time. Just believe me, as someone who's done a lot of interviews, I know that one.
Well, so, you know, I listened to the Dell, you know, your thoughts. I don't know if it released today or yesterday. So I sort of know the answer, but this one I was curious. Do you study? Are you like a law guy? Meaning, do you fight it in court? How do you approach if you have to have an interaction with a cop? What's your approach?
Yeah, if I have to have an interaction with cops, it's just I'm gonna whatever. You know, I'm gonna stay shut. First of all, you don't answer questions. Don't say anything. If they ask you questions, I don't. The great response is, I don't answer questions. What are they going to do about it? I mean, you know, have a camera, have something set up.
Yeah.
I would much rather deal with lawyers. I have studied a lot of the law. That's another thing that's very important to know, is if you're going to, you're in their system, you have to know how their systems run. I mean, you're not going to know everything, of course, because they don't know everything.
No.
But anything that you could possibly get you jammed up, maybe you should really look into the law behind that and everything and know. So if you get hauled in on a camera ticket, you know, how do you deal with that? Well, you know, there are a lot of ways to deal with that. So, you know, and I mean, that's just a very simple one. You know, I'm pretty confident going into any courtroom and knowing how to talk to the lawyers and knowing how to talk to the judge, so that they know where I'm coming from. I've walked out of a couple court situations where my wife has actually shook her head and she's like, I can't believe you just did that.
Right.
You're not in cuffs. Well, the only reason that happened is because I was really, really prepared before I went in. So, yeah.
And that's half the battle. Sorry, I don't know if that's coming through, but I've got a headset vibrating.
Yeah, I can hear that. Yeah.
Well, it'll go off in a second. I've hidden it from myself. I was being all good taking it off, so it's not in the view. But oh well, it'll go away in just a moment. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like that's important because you can't talk to the cops. You made an excellent point today, or like I said, whatever the podcast that was, that A, they have no duty to protect. B, their stop is specifically to investigate. So shut your mouth. Don't talk to the cops, and then don't fight them. If you're going to fight, learn to do it in court, is my opinion.
Yeah. The classic line about cops is they're historians. They're just there initially they're just there to find out what happened. But if they start questioning you, like James Duane said in his book, You Have the Right to Remain Innocent, shut the hell up and wait for a lawyer to get there. Even if you know you did nothing wrong, even if you know you're 100% innocent, I don't answer questions, lawyer. I don't answer questions. Lawyer.
Yep.
And I've gotten to the point where I'm good enough where I don't need a lawyer, but I'm still going to ask for a lawyer because I've come to realize that even if you are willing to take stuff into your own hands in court, it's good to have that person standing beside you because it doesn't make you look like a complete lunatic. Most of the people that look like complete lunatics get up there and they just start ranting on their own. And the reason I've been able to be successful in court is because I don't rant like a lunatic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, except on my podcast and on social media and in my life mostly. But somehow I manage to keep it together when I go to court.
Well, that's the key of understanding when the time to rant is.
Yeah.
Well, my last topic is hopefully your favorite. I know you're a gun guy. You know, how did you come to be a fan?
When I was growing up, growing up in New York City until I was 18, there was no guns around. Yeah. It was, you were pretty much indoctrinated that if you were carrying a gun, you were a criminal. I had an uncle who lived up in the North Bronx who had a bunch of guns. I mean, he had a lot of guns. I'm not sure if they were legal or not. But right after high school, I moved to South Florida. And even in South Florida, I didn't become really a gun guy until I got a little bit older. And my mom had remarried, and the guy she remarried had a massive heart attack and died. And she was looking through his stuff and everything, and he was armed security. So he had a couple guns, and I said, "Can I have them?" And she's like, "Sure." I'm not going to, I mean, she wouldn't even touch them. That's right. The way she was. So I started, I went out and bought some ammo and took it to the range. I didn't even really know what I was doing with them. So then the first time I went to the range, I was just like, this really isn't a lot of fun. But a couple months later, I found a gun store very close to me within walking distance. And it was owned by all active duty police. And they taught me, it's funny, every bit of training I've ever had in my life is either by police, ex-military, ex-Blackwater. I figure, I may not like those guys a whole lot, but they're pretty damn good at what they do. So let me learn from these guys, especially just, certain techniques and especially how to handle it, how to handle. And then of course, when I wanted to learn how to shoot, the only two people I've ever taken lessons from are both ex-Blackwater, and those guys were amazing, man. They taught me. I mean, I can't even talk enough about how. I mean, one of the guys is a sky marshal now, and he's like, anytime you want, man. I like to go up into the Tennessee hills, and we can go shooting 1,000 yards and go shoot 1,200 yards and everything like that. And I'm like,
nice.
And I'm like, and he's like, I'll teach you how to do that because he was originally a Marine Corps sniper.
Yeah.
So so I was, I mean, it's funny. I get around those guys, and I'm just going to take advantage of what they know. I don't have to agree with everything that they do, but to give them, put it this way, I have no problem whatsoever with the money that I've handed over to people who are in the law enforcement, that I voluntarily handed over people in law enforcement to teach me how to shoot how they shoot, So that's how I got into it. And then, down in South Florida, you really could only do so much. So when I moved up here, I played a lot of golf in South Florida, and I did some shooting. And I'm like, both of these are really expensive hobbies. What do I want to do up here? And I'm like, I'm giving up golf, and I'm going to stick with the shooting. So that's what happened. I've been in Georgia for a decade now, and I like the openness of the gun culture here.
Yeah,
so I made a lot of I have to deal with a lot of bootlickers, and you also have to deal with a lot of law enforcement and everything. But it's, if I'm going to live the kind of life the life I live, then, and with the ideology that I have to be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's one of my favorite. I mean, I totally agree. Like the gun culture in Georgia is fantastic. I mean, I'm from Arizona, and so
Oh yeah.
it's as close as you can. So I grew up from that principle, and I totally hear you because the one thing I'm one that I hate watch stuff, and I watch it to understand. I watch a lot of just like cops being violent videos, but they are well trained and have some excellent technique. And
No, some of them. I mean, I know cops who are not gun guys,
yeah, yeah,
and they're actually really, I shoot better than them. But there are a lot that are really into it, especially the former military guys. And you can learn a hell of a lot from them.
yeah. Well, and then so what's your favorite weapon right this second? Is there anything that's the one that's got you all worked up right now?
Oh, it's a bastardized AR that one of the listeners of my podcast actually built for me.
Nice.
Yeah,
Is
it
it
was.
is it considered like a ghost gun?
Yeah. A ghost gun would be like. I mean, I would say that's like built from 80% lower. No, this is from a regular. This is just from a
Okay.
regular lower. It has serial
Yes.
numbers, but he he's a gunsmith, and
Nice.
he also teaches it, and he built it. He built me a, just I didn't have a 16-inch barrel. I have all short barrels, and yeah, this one is really tight. The trigger has no travel whatsoever on it, and it's everything I could have dreamed for in a 16-inch
Well,
16-inch AR.
I'll have to hit you up for a connection just for a good gunsmith because just as a side, I've got a site I cannot get out. So I've been looking for a decent one. And my gun store, they lost their gunsmith. And so,
Oh wow.
it's a great, it's a great thing. I might see if I'll get you some work for him. Um, well, yeah, I like my recent one. So I'm in a hunting club that we go down South Georgia and, shoot.
Mhm.
One day maybe I could talk you into going down with me. But my favorite gun right now is just a old lever action 45 70, and just it's a cannon, but it's just fun. I love the lever action.
Yeah, I mean, it's so classic, so old west.
uh,
Uh,
and then I actually have one of the I built out a couple of the 80%, and the other thing I do have is the actual Ghost Gunner, and so I milled a couple of them.
oh wow.
Maybe sometime in a voluntary trade we could trade a couple milled pieces.
Yes, we can definitely do that. Yes. That was the first thing that came into my mind. Yes. I'll
Well,
get some 80%ers and I'll hit you up.
yeah, yeah, man, that'd be awesome. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. You've been great, Pete. I mean, I really, really appreciate this. And again, this was Pete Mance Raymond from Freeman Beyond the Wall for the Autonomy Season 1 lectures. And thank you, brother.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.